Socrates was a Greek philosopher from Athens who is credited as one of the founders of Western philosophy, and as being the first moral philosopher of the Western ethical tradition of thought. An enigmatic figure, he made no writings, and is known chiefly through the accounts of classical writers writing after his lifetime, particularly his students Plato and Xenophon. Other sources include the contemporaneous Antisthenes, Aristippus, and Aeschines of Sphetos. Aristophanes, a playwright, is the main contemporary author to have written plays mentioning Socrates during Socrates' lifetime, though a fragment of Ion of Chios' travel journal provides important information about Socrates' youth. Born 470 BC. D. Malapis, Athens. Died 399 BC, aged approximately 71. Athens. Cause of death: execution by forced suicide by poisoning. Spouse, S. Xanthippirancient Greek philosophy. Region Western Philosophy School. Classical Greek philosophy. Notable students: Plato, Xenophon, Antisthenes, Aristippus, Alcibiades, Critias. Main interests: epistemology, ethics, teleology. Notable ideas: social gadfly, Socratic method, Socratic intellectualism, Socratic paradox, Socratic questioning, Socratic irony, Euthyphro dilemma, the unexamined life is not worth living. Influences: Prodicus, Anaxagoras, Archelaus, Diotima, Damon. Plato's dialogues are among the most comprehensive accounts of Socrates to survive from antiquity, from which Socrates has become renowned for his contributions to the fields of ethics and epistemology. It is this Platonic Socrates who lends his name to the concepts of Socratic irony and the Socratic method, or elenchus. However, questions remain regarding the distinction between the real-life Socrates and Plato's portrayal of Socrates in his dialogues. Socrates exerted a strong influence on philosophers in later antiquity and in the modern era. Depictions of Socrates in art, literature and popular culture have made him one of the most widely known figures in the Western philosophical tradition. Details about the life of Socrates are derived from both contemporary sources, and later ancient period sources. Of the contemporary sources, the greater extent of information is taken from the dialogues of Plato and Xenophon, both devotees of Socrates, and the testaments of Antisthenes, Aristippus, and Aeschines of Sphetos, and the lesser from the plays of Aristophanes. Later ancient period sources include Aristoxenus, Apollodorus of Athens, alive during the 2nd century BC, Cicero, alive 106-43 BC, and Diogenes Laertius, alive probably in the earlier half of the 3rd century AD. The sources are thought to have in part or wholly made use of the factual information of the life of Socrates available to each of them, to give their own interpretation of the nature of his teaching, giving rise to different versions in each case. For example, in Aristophanes' play The Clouds, Socrates is made into a clown of sorts, particularly inclined toward sophistry, who teaches his students how to bamboozle their way out of debt. However, since most of Aristophanes' works function as parodies, it is presumed that his characterization in this play was also not literal. In Phaedo, which is the only attested source describing the death of Socrates, Plato is thought to have selected and omitted details to provide material for his argument for the existence of the liberation of the soul from the body, an argument he possessed from learning of the ideas of Pythagoras, born sometime after 606 and died sometime after 510 BC. Arrest of Leon. Plato's Apology, parts 32c to 32d, describes how Socrates and 4 others were summoned to the Tholos, and told by representatives of the oligarchy of the 30. The oligarchy began ruling in 404 BC, to go to Salamis to arrest Leon the Salaminian, who was to be brought back to be subsequently executed. However, Socrates was the only one of the 5 men who chose not to go to Salamis as he was expected to, because he did not want to be involved in what he considered a crime and despite the risk of subsequent retribution from the tyrants. Trial and death. Causes. Socrates lived during the time of the transition from the height of the Athenian hegemony to its decline with the defeat by Sparta and its allies in the Peloponnesian War. At a time when Athens sought to stabilize and recover from its defeat, the Athenian public may have been entertaining doubts about democracy as an efficient form of government. Socrates appears to have been a critic of democracy, and some scholars interpret his trial as an expression of political infighting. Claiming loyalty to his city, Socrates clashed with the current course of Athenian politics and society. He praised Sparta, arch-rival to Athens, directly and indirectly in various dialogues. One of Socrates' purported offenses to the city was his position as a social and moral critic. Rather than upholding a status quo and accepting the development of what he perceived as immorality within his region, Socrates questioned the collective notion of might makes right that he felt was common in Greece during this period. Plato refers to Socrates as the gadfly of the state, as the gadfly stings the horse into action, so Socrates stung various Athenians, insofar as he irritated some people with considerations of justice and the pursuit of goodness. According to Plato's Apology, Socrates' life as the gadfly of Athens began when his friend Chaerephon asked the oracle at Delphi if anyone were wiser than Socrates. The oracle responded that no one was wiser. Socrates believed the oracle's response was not correct, because he believed he possessed no wisdom whatsoever. He proceeded to test the riddle by approaching men considered wise by the people of Athens, statesmen, poets, and artisans, in order to refute the oracle's pronouncement. Questioning them, however, Socrates concluded, while each man thought he knew a great deal and was wise, in fact, they knew very little and were not wise at all. So Socrates interpreted the meaning of the oracle thus: while so-called wise men thought themselves wise and yet were not, he himself knew he was not wise at all, which, paradoxically, made him the wiser one since he was the only person aware of his own ignorance. Socrates' paradoxical wisdom made the prominent Athenians he publicly questioned look foolish, turning them against him and leading to accusations of wrongdoing. Socrates defended his role as a gadfly until the end. At his trial, when Socrates was asked to propose his own punishment, he suggested a wage paid by the government and free dinners for the rest of his life instead, to finance the time he spent as Athens' benefactor. Robin Waterfield suggests that Socrates was a voluntary scapegoat. His death was the purifying remedy for Athens' misfortunes. In this view, the token of appreciation for Asclepius, the Greek god for curing illness, the cockerel that he speaks of to Crito, would represent a cure for Athens' ailments. However, because a cockerel was a common thanks offering and of no great value, this interpretation has been disputed. Socrates may only have been asking Crito to remember to fulfill a vow taken for the sake of an unnamed friend who had recovered from illness. Trial. Main article, Trial of Socrates. In 399 BC, Socrates went on trial and was subsequently found guilty of both corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens and of impiety, aspeia, not believing in the gods of the state, and as a punishment sentenced to death, caused by the drinking of a mixture containing poison hemlock. Death. Socrates' death is described at the end of Plato's Phaedo, although Plato was not himself present at the execution. As to the veracity of Plato's account, it seems possible he made choice of a number of certain factors, perhaps omitting others in the description of the death, as the Phaedo description does not describe progress of the action of the poison, Gil 1973, in concurrence with modern descriptions. Phaedo states, after drinking the poison, he was instructed to walk around until his legs felt numb. After he lay down, the man who administered the poison pinched his foot. Socrates could no longer feel his legs. The numbness slowly crept up his body until it reached his heart. Socrates chose to cover his face during the execution. 118a6 Phaedo. According to Phaedo, 61c 69e, Socrates stated that, a ll of philosophy is training for death. Last words. Socrates' last words are thought to be ironic, c. Gil 1973, or sincere, j. Crooks 1998, Socrates speaks his last words to Crito. Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please, don't forget to pay the debt. Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius, pay it and do not neglect it. Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius, make this offering to him and do not forget. Refusal to escape. Socrates turned down Crito's pleas to attempt an escape from prison. Xenophon and Plato agree that Socrates had an opportunity to escape, as his followers were able to bribe the prison guards. There have been several suggestions offered as reasons why he chose to stay. He believed such a flight would indicate a fear of death, which he believed no true philosopher has. If he fled Athens, his teaching would fare no better in another country, as he would continue questioning all he met and undoubtedly incur their displeasure. Having knowingly agreed to live under the city's laws, he implicitly subjected himself to the possibility of being accused of crimes by its citizens and judged guilty by its jury. To do otherwise would have caused him to break his social contract with the state, and so harm the state, an unprincipled act. If he escaped at the instigation of his friends, then his friends would become liable in law. The full reasoning behind his refusal to flee is the main subject of the Crito-Inasmic, as Socrates drank hemlock willingly without complaint, having decided against fleeing. R.G. Frey, 1978, has suggested in truth, Socrates chose to commit suicide.